Hey, what's up? It's Ms. D. And in this video, I'm going to be going over ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt, of course, is one of the four river valley civilizations of Eurasia, and it's located right here in this northeastern corner of the African continent. Now, if you're familiar with this part of the world, you may be thinking to yourself, I thought this part of the world is pretty hot and dry, right? They're deserts, camels crossing the Sahara, right? How is this area of the world able to produce an agricultural surplus that would allow for the growth of a civilization? And the answer basically is the Nile River. I mean, that's literally where you get the nickname Gift of the Nile. That's one of the nicknames for ancient Egypt. And it is thanks to the fact that you have the Nile River and that the Nile River floods, and that those floods bring, again, as we've discussed, those flood waters bring fertile land, and the waters from the river can be used to irrigate your crops. They can be used to water the land. In ancient Egypt, there's actually one more positive that comes with the Nile River, and that is that the Nile River, unlike the other rivers we're going to take a look at, this one, when it floods, it is both gentle and predictable. It happens about twice a year. They knew when the floods were coming. And, in the other civilizations, when the floodwaters came, you got a body count. I mean, people died, people drowned. Not in Egypt. In Egypt, they knew the water was coming. They were able to manage it much better. And so one of the themes we're going to take a look at throughout the year is this idea that the environment affects the people, that the issues you deal with in the natural environment are going to affect the culture that you developed. It's going to affect how people live and things like that. And this is one example of that this Nile River you can see the influence of the Nile River on Egyptian religion. So as you may be aware, ancient Egypt, like Mesopotamia, is a polytheistic religion. There are multiple gods, and naturally there is a god of the Nile, that is Hapi. In addition, the Nile gods, I shouldn't say Nile gods, I should say the Egyptian gods are generally characterized as benevolent. I'm not the subject matter expert on Egyptian religion, but generally speaking, they're pretty benevolent. They take care of the people. The people feel protected by the gods. This is very different than the nature of the gods of Mesopotamia. The Mesopotamian gods are, generally speaking, they're pretty vicious. They can be very impulsive and capricious and unpredictable. And so it's been argued that the nature of the gods is a reflection of the nature of the civilization, the kind of environment in which people are coming up. So in a place like Mesopotamia, where the floods were unpredictable, where there was a lot of warfare, there was a lot of unrest between and fighting between the different city-states. Here in ancient Egypt, very different civilization, very different environment, and that is reflected in their religion. All right, so like I said, the floods of ancient Egypt were predictable and gentle. So what do I mean by predictable? That you knew when I say you knew when the floodwaters are coming, they were able to develop technologies in ancient Egypt to know when to expect the flood. So for example, you see these two gentlemen here on the steps. Those steps are actually what they call nilometers. So the idea is I can't give you like a super detailed thing about it, but the idea is that supposedly the water comes up to a particular step. And when you start to see the waters kind of rise to a certain step, it allows you to kind of measure where the water is at and to let you know if the floods are going to be, greater or less than years previous. And it kind of gives you a feel for when to expect the floods to come. In addition, the ancient Egyptians do develop a calendar, again, enabling them to know when the floodwaters are coming. And again, another piece of technology that they develop is irrigation, and we're going to go into that. So please bear in mind, when we use the word technology in global history, we're not talking about technology like high tech. You don't need to plug it in. It's not just computers and radios and things like that. Technology can include a calendar, an irrigation system, things like that. All right. And so when we talk about this irrigation systems, please again remember another theme of global history, which is that people can affect the environment. So again, just to review, the environment affects people and people affect the environment. So people are not just victims of the environment, right? Sitting around with our, twiddling our thumbs. In fact, humans can develop technologies to change the environment to enable the growth of civilization, to allow people to live, better, easier, more advanced lives or whatever. So what kind of what kind of irrigation technology did the ancient Egyptians develop? Well, you had things like canals, which you can see from the picture. So you're able to kind of have these tracks where the Nile River waters can flow through to give greater areas access to the Nile's waters. They built dikes. These are walls, reinforced walls that the idea is that, when the flood waters come, you have these walls to hold back the water. There was a sustainable, okay, so this idea is this. In a lot of cultures, one of the issues we're going to see with agriculture is that if the systems in Egypt were much more advanced than a lot of the other civilizations. So what happens is the capital of Egypt and where the civilization stays, we're not going to see this civilization move a lot. We're not going to see this civilization be abandoned and things like that. And it's because the agricultural system and the way Egyptians were able to use the land and use the waters allowed for sustainability. The civilization was able to stay in the same location and thrive for thousands of years. And so again, there's less need to move your cities, your capital cities, which again, we're going to see over and over again, where cities will be abandoned because, they stop being able to produce enough food, but also this need for warfare. What happens is again, kind of recalling Mesopotamia, one of the reasons why a lot of these city-states were constantly at war with each other is because they were battling over resources. Because if you were short of food you needed to go attack somebody else for it. But in Egypt, you're able to produce such a surplus. You're able to make such good use of the environment and develop technologies that allow for that there wasn't this need for constant warfare. All right. So again, as I said, this irrigation systems included canals, it included dikes. It also included the shadoof. That's the thing you see there on the left. So this bucket kind of system with the counterweight, this allows you to bring water from lower areas up to higher areas. Basins, long story short, this is like basically digging a hole. And so when the flood waters come, the flood waters are collected in basins. And then even after the waters recede, after the flood is gone and the flood waters recede, you kind of keep that water stuck and trapped inside the basin so you can continue to use it. All right. So with this kind of large-scale irrigation system, this is not something that one or two people just whip up. If you remember, we had talked about some of the characteristics of a civilization. One of the things we talked about is this idea of a public work, that you can develop things for the use of all of the people in the civilization. And so this irrigation, these types of irrigation technologies, these are examples of public works. And a public work, the only way you're able to get this to happen is you must have some type of organized government. That it is the government, the development of an effective government that is able to organize your workforce to build and create these kinds of technologies. So again, you would have governors. So you had the pharaoh who was at the top, and the pharaoh had governors that worked in the other areas of the empire of, the Egyptian empire. And then they would be the ones digging, repairing the canals, the dikes, making sure everything worked for the benefit of the society. And again, government also passed laws. So for example, in the Book of the Dead, we see references to the fact that all of the people within ancient Egypt had responsibility to share the water and use the water in a way that benefited the society. That, for example, you couldn't, ooh, that's my timer. So you couldn't, for example, block your neighbor's access to the water. All right. That's the 10-minute timer. So I'm going to stop here and I will pick up with part 2.